Toft is my name. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Emotionise AI, which is it's a generative AI company, and we have trained AI to be emotionally intelligent. So just a bit of background on myself. I actually started my career as a journalist and broadcaster, so working for BBC and SBS Australia and RTE, and then I left RTE and I trained to be a psychotherapist. So what we've done is we've trained AI in very good communication skills and emotional intelligence. So it's a combination of my communication skills and my psychotherapy training, and we help improve outcomes for employee engagement and for customer support. But we're getting a lot of traction in the learning and development space as well, particularly with AI. So I'd like to welcome the panel on stage. If everyone could come up, please, that would be great. So Natalie, Geddis, Carl Morrissey, Michelle Thompson, and Ryan McInnes. So I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves, if that's okay, because you can all say it's a lot better than I can, and then we'll get started on the discussion. So, Natalie, if you want to go ahead.
Yes, thank you. It's lovely to be here. So, my name is Natalie Geddis. I am Client Services Manager for a company called Aurion. So, we're headquartered in Belfast, and we're a full-service online learning development company, and we focus on developing solutions to meet really any learning challenge through a digital medium, and that ranges from configuring and deploying platforms right through to custom content and elements of consultancy and strategy.
Thanks, Natalie. Carl from Intuition.
Yeah, thanks, Marie. I'm Carl Morrissey. I'm Intuition's head of marketing. Intuition have been operating just coming up in 40 years, mostly to multinationals, where we work with them on the skills and the performance of their people. As part of my role, I promote our products and services, and I also manage our Irish client base.
Thanks, Carl. Michelle from Skillnet.
Yeah, so thanks for having me here today. Michelle Thompson. I am Strategic Partnerships Manager at Skillnet Ireland. So for those of you who don't know, Skillnet Ireland is the National Talent Development Agency of the Government of Ireland, and our mission is to ensure that Irish businesses or businesses based in Ireland of all sizes and all sectors have the skills that they need to have that competitive edge in business. Yeah.
Thanks, Michelle. And Ryan from Learning Rooms.
Yeah, so I'm Ryan. I'm the eLearning director at the Learning Rooms, and I run the digital side of the business. So anything from bespoke content development on behalf of our clients to our in-house programs and projects that we, I suppose, in terms of training clients to be able to develop their own content and licensing our off-the-shelf products.
Thanks, Ryan. So the title of today's discussion is looking at future trends and challenges, particularly in light of technology. And I know everyone has heard a lot about technology here today, so we're going to hear a little bit more about it, but we're going to get back to the kind of the more human side of things and what trends we're seeing, and then how can technology effectively kind of provide solutions for that. So I'd like to start, Michelle, with you, because you're looking at kind of the real macro look at this. So in terms of, things are changing so rapidly and that pace is only going to increase. What are the biggest challenges and trends that you see at the moment?
So I guess from Skillnet Ireland, we operate through our 70 Skillnet business networks around the country that have a sectoral and regional focus. So we have a real tentacles or finger on the pulse even of what we're seeing. But even from a policy perspective, I guess, looking at the OECD Skills Report for Ireland that was released last year, it talks about how Ireland has one of the highest third level education rates in Europe at 64%. But actually, when it comes to education following that, after your third level, we really significantly dropped down to about 47%. And so I think one of the key trends that we're seeing is very important is that lifelong learning, or life-wide learning, actually, I think is referred to in the report. So we really see that as hugely, hugely important, especially with those trends in terms of, very tight labour market, the changes that are coming in digitalisation and sustainability. Like, skills are changing and people need to stay relevant and keep upskilling and keep reskilling. So that lifelong learning is a huge piece. But I guess the challenge then in that is, and I don't know whether COVID kind of brought an element to this, and can we still talk about COVID? I don't know. But definitely people, I think, reprioritise how they want to spend their time. So if you're looking, we work specifically with businesses. So we're looking at that earner-learner who are very kind of time poor. And so what a lot of the trends we're seeing now through our 70 or so networks, and we're seeing this through data and insight, but also anecdotally, is this real shift to modular learning. And I think everyone in the room would be familiar with the micro-creds and micro-quals, and just in responding to that kind of earner-learner profile, that kind of modular learning, that kind of asynchronistic learning is getting more and more important. And I think as well, that motivation piece then is the accreditation. So I think there's still a significant lean on the accredited piece as well. So I think that's something, whether that's now a badge to a micro-qual or something smaller, I think people need to see that kind of recognition of the investment of their time in their learning. So they're kind of the three things: the lifelong learning, the modularization, and the accreditation piece.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Michelle. Carl, you were saying that you're actually seeing an emphasis as well, though, on kind of human skills, that blend of accreditation, but also human skills as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. It's probably because of AI a little bit, actually, and I know we're going to speak about AI after. But there's been a huge emphasis among our client base and in our organisation on human skills, so empathy, creativity, teamwork, collaboration, that type of thing. So it was born out of World Economic Forum report last year, Future Work 2023, that placed human skills as the most important set of skills for the workforce for the next 10 years. So that's a huge area of focus for us. Away from that, in preparation for this panel, I reached out to some of our senior sales folks who are out there somewhere on what they're seeing in the clients, because that's where the real intel lives. And there was some interesting conflicting findings. So there was old skill trends like blended learning. So the blend of e-learning and workshops is really, really popular in London at the moment, which I found quite surprising. And to echo what Michelle was saying around accreditation, is not going anywhere. So it's like that's a huge, huge motivator for the reason why people take training initiatives. So whether that's CPE, whether it's micro-credentialing or badging. So they're kind of the three biggies for us. Oh, sorry, the one I left out was data analytics. So learning departments are extremely eager to show the ROI on their investment with learning organizations. So whether that's impact, whether that's business performance, and we're using platforms such as Power BI to show off those pieces of data. So three very different trends, but probably in no order of importance for ourselves.
Okay, thanks very much, Carl. And Natalie, you were, talking about challenges particularly. I thought it was interesting. You were talking about the EAA deadline particularly. Do you want to tell us a bit about that and what you're seeing?
Yeah, so we were discussing obviously in preparation for today around some challenges, and we work sort of sector agnostic. We do have particular experience in the public sector and the public sector in the Republic of Ireland, and a lot of those discovery conversations around what are your current challenges, what are your needs in addressing what do you put in your roadmap. It seems to be very focused on accessibility. And certainly today, I've had a number of different conversations with people approaching us. We've had a little bit of an accessibility challenge on the stand, and it's been very, very popular. But I think they're mainly, the approach to the question around accessibility is normally around the European Accessibility Act, which comes into play in June 2025. And the typical questions we're finding is, what does this mean for me and my organisation and my role as a content creator, as a learning development lead who has ownership of content and learning interventions. And I think it's just about understanding that there's two sides to it really. You've got your legacy content that is already there and distributed and is available. So how do you address that in time and at scale? And then also what that means going forward for creating content. So if I was to approach that, individually, the legacy content, it's important to note that the deadline, the Act in 2025 is not the deadline for legacy content updates. It's for future content that's created after that date. It applies. So really just focusing on creating almost like a content hierarchy of your existing content and approaching that from what is more readily consumed and what's more popular, and then working back from there, because you have to create a sort of scalable approach. But it's really important just to note that that's not the deadline, but having something in place where you're showing progress and an investment in time to do that. And then also for creating content past that date and even from now on, it's really just trying to embed a culture of accessibility within the organisation when it focuses on content, and bringing it back to basics. So does everyone who contributes, right, from your subject matter experts to people using the tools to those consuming content that take part in workshops, for example, understand the principles, the core principles? So is it perceivable, operable, understandable and robust as a very basic level? But just in general, what the accessibility policy, the content creation policy is for the organisation, and having that in place. And just really having accessible first when you think of design, right from the learn and design contribution to that intervention, and also how you put that out there, the accessible experience that the platform provides and things. So if you think accessible first, other things like the interactivities and the engagement with the learning can almost come second to that, and it's not going to be any poorer for having taken an accessible first approach.
Very good. Thank you. And Ryan, talking to you again earlier, I thought it was really interesting. You're really looking at the whole idea of empowering learning and development teams within organisations, isn't that right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I suppose what we're seeing is huge growth, specifically, I suppose, since COVID, in that organizations really wanting to make put their content online. And instead of it just being a live Zoom session or a video recording, what we're helping organizations do is properly instructionally design and build interactive e-learning content. So as opposed to coming to us, what we're doing is we're helping develop those skills and competencies in-house. And similar to probably what Natalie is saying about, what does accessibility look like from an instructional design perspective, but also what does good instructional design look like? And then looking at, I suppose, templates, training, and policies and procedures throughout the whole organization to, I suppose, design good quality learning that's high quality production and it's on brand. So that everything that an organization is developing, it looks good, it works good, but actually it comes from a learning first, accessibility first, but learning first as well, So that's, I suppose, from our perspective, has been a huge shift in the last number of years.
And that leads me on to my next question, which is really about, obviously, COVID might seem like a distant memory, but it did really transform everything, and it accelerated everything. And now, are we looking at more of companies focusing on future-proofing and continuous learning as opposed to before? Has that changed it? So, Michelle, what's your experience there? What is the priority for companies at the moment?
Yeah, I guess through our Skillnet business networks, we had company engagements with nearly 26,600 companies in 2023. So you could say that that's a good, strong engagement, that companies are interested and want to focus on their skills. Now, whether that is some fundamental skills or really the future of work focus is, I think it's a broad range. It's a little bit of everything. We actually undertook a skills survey for the first time this year, solely focused on skills. And we held structured interviews with 500 companies, large and small sizes. And there's some stats from that I think are kind of interesting and relevant to this. We saw that 74% of employers engaged in some form of upskilling in the last 12 months, which is quite encouraging. But over half of these businesses still reported challenges in recruiting staff with the right skills, so that was telling. 56% of businesses have seen a shift in the core skills required in the last 2 to 3 years. And 40% of larger businesses consider AI to have the potential to facilitate growth in the next 2 to 3 years. So we were getting lots of data from that research that was kind of encouraging in terms of validating our what we thought we knew in this area, and that companies are focused on it. But so I think there is an awareness and a focus on skills. But I'd like to, and it wasn't really your question, but I'm going to lob it in there anyway, just because 90% of the businesses that Skillnet Ireland deal with are SMEs. And so there's a huge amount. They might know that they should focus on talent, but I think there's a huge challenge for SMEs businesses to kind of commit. But more specifically, I think money is a barrier. And that's something that we try and address directly with our subsidies through our programs. But actually time is the biggest barrier. And I think there's something that could be discussed here in terms of there might be a focus on skills, but how do we actually support our businesses to kind of address those challenges, especially at the small to medium size? So, yeah.
Absolutely. That's what's needed, isn't it? Exactly. Yeah. And Natalie, you were saying that this kind of COVID obviously accelerated digitalization, but are you seeing more of an emphasis on this constantly, like Michelle was saying, having to make sure that the skills are there, the continuous learning. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, I think, again, COVID always goes into the conversation somewhere, but, in a post-COVID world, I suppose what we're seeing is organisations back when COVID happened, obviously, reacted quickly to get platforms in place to share content, to make sure content and learning was still accessible to people who are working remotely. I think what we're seeing now is that those same organisations have taken time and taken stock over the last number of years to really settle and figure out, okay, that was done at speed. How can we approach things, longer term? Is the platform or the content that we have right for what we're trying to do and address? And it's really opened up an opportunity for them to think deeper around the type of platform, say for example, that they choose, and make sure they're putting something in place that has a scalable set of features and functionality, that even if that's not where they are right now, where they have the capacity to look at, really closely at skills development, that they put something in place that has a long life cycle in it, that in a few years' time, when they've built up capacity internally and an understanding of how to create a skills taxonomy and how to focus on individual skills development within performance management aspect of the company, that it's there rather than having to switch lanes, a few years later onto a different platform. So I think it's definitely opened up that opportunity. Again, on the back of that, then what that's done, those very same platforms that focus on things like that allow you to have a look at what we call decentralizing the learning. So, L&D teams, as you all know, normally quite small and very, very time poor. You're supporting sometimes a very small L&D team support a massive organization, and there's a lot of pressure put on you. And I think that idea of decentralizing the learning, so it's not top down. So if you have subject matter experts in different areas of the business, as opposed to them come back to L&D and saying, I need this element of course created, that you enable them through permissions at the platform level to push their own content out to teams that they manage, or the people that they're in certain groups, that they're sort of mentoring. So that decentralizing has been actually quite a big topic of conversation at the platform stage. So that's sort of what we're seeing.
Good. Yeah, and talking about pressure, Carl, everybody is still kind of coming to terms with digitalization, and hot on the heels now is AI. So we're all just kind of still getting over that, and now AI is on top of us. How is Intuition endeavouring to kind of stay ahead in that?
Yeah, we've never really been afraid of technology innovation. I mean, I'm the company's head of marketing, so what you learned in marketing 3 years ago is completely irrelevant 3 years later. So the way we view marketing, not intuition, I don't want to get killed, is we embrace it, But at an organizational level, what it's been used so far is to, streamline production and processes, right? It's kind of boring, but I mean, it's really, really impactful. So things like draft one of content, graphic generation, AI voiceover, human-like avatars built in platforms like Synthesia. These will be hugely time-consuming, expensive things to do that are now significantly less expensive to do. Another good example would be localization. So localization of a course, a piece of content, would take a long time. You would need a person who speaks that language locally to sanity check it. Now you can generate it after teaching a model. It may need a little bit of QA testing, but for something that wouldn't have been viable for the business, is now viable for the business, So really practical application-based stuff. We're building a couple of AI-based products as well that I don't want to speak too much about yet, because they could fundamentally change by the time they're brought to the market. But we take a quite practical approach to what we're doing in the AI space.
And Ryan, you were saying earlier, I thought that's interesting, picking up on Carl saying there, even translation, how much it's reduced costs, all of that. But you have put a lot of work into this. You spent 3 months really looking at what AI kind of solutions are currently out there, and I'm sure everybody would be really delighted to kind of hear what your prognosis was.
So we spent, I suppose, within the organisation, we had a 3-month work group on, I suppose, not just AI, but we looked at emerging technologies for what would help us do what we do better, do more, or do it cheaper or quicker. And I suppose it's very specific around the development of digital learning or e-learning content. So my team is I suppose, split in 2 sides. So there's the instructional design side, which is very much looking at it from a learning science perspective, looking at the content, working with the subject matter experts, and writing and storyboarding the courses. And from that perspective, we ended up, we narrowed it down to Claude, and so we have adopted Claude. We're using it, we're still learning. We're still trying to figure out where we can use it better. But it certainly has brought us new ideas, and it has probably streamlined some of the processes. The other side of the business, or the other side of the team then, is multimedia design and development. So that's where we do all our film production, all our animation, and all of the, I suppose, the graphic and interactive design and building. And from that perspective, we didn't really find anything. So there are certainly tools, the text to voice we've been using for years. We use it, but we still replace everything with a human recorded voiceover. Whenever it comes to the avatars, they look good. Natalie and I actually were having a conversation earlier and probably agreed that an organization would probably be able to use that themselves and would be fine. But when they come to an organization like the Learning Rooms, they're not really going to accept that sort of output. So we still end up, traveling, whatever, to do all the film production, and so we just didn't really find anything from a multimedia design perspective that was revolutionary.
Yeah, so we're still
So I think they are getting there. They're getting better. So they're the small things like expanding the background of a photo or taking the water off the table that can be useful. Stock photo, taking an American plug off the wall, great. But that's revolutionary in terms of the types of professional multimedia content that we produce. We just didn't really find very much.
That's interesting. By the way, if someone could give me a 5-minute countdown, so we're getting so caught up in the chat, we could probably keep talking, and I know we're finishing up at 4:05. My own organisation, where I see application, and in fact we did a trial with Intuition in July, and so I just want to talk briefly about your own experience about this, where I see it, having been training and fine-tuning AI. We've been working with OpenAI since September 21, so a full year before ChatGPT was launched. What we do is we give you what's called an emotional audit on your sentences. So when you write something, our AI is intuitive, and it can tell you if your content is emotionally intelligent or might need a little bit of extra help. And it'll tell you why it'll need a bit of extra help. So maybe your target audience might feel dismissed or undervalued. And the application of that in learning and development can be very strong, and certainly with Intuition, because if you go and do in-person courses, this is technology that can potentially basically be there as a cognitive collaborator for users so that they don't forget the course when they walk out of the room. Have any of you seen that kind of application, that kind of cognitive collaborator type, where it's just a reminder on your shoulder? So learning and development is an ongoing process. Has any application of that so far?
Yeah, I can probably jump in. Where it gets exciting for me would be in content writing. So my content lead is down there who's prolific in writing content for ourselves. But having a tool to say, maybe reframe this language for it to be slightly more polished, slightly more empathetic, slightly more salesy, is fantastic. And in my extreme entry-level experience, this type of stuff, I use Grammarly Pro, and that does, I'm sure, not to the same level of what Emotionise would do.
No, Grammarly is a rather larger organisation.
Yeah, for the moment. But that gives good tips and saying maybe reframe, shorten, more concise language, more empathetic language, that type of thing. So that would be my experience of that type of world. But I can very much see the benefit, because sometimes you write a paragraph and you're like, what am I droning on about here, And having that little guide to say, maybe change here and there was handy.
And the other trend that we were talking about was this whole idea of personalization. Is that something that you're seeing more and more? Because, again, I'm sure some of you today have heard of agentic AI. We're using agentic AI as well, and you can train AI in extremely precise ways. That trend towards personalization, first of all, is that something you're seeing? And secondly, is that something you see that AI potentially could help you with?
I can maybe.
Yeah, of
in there,
course.
that's okay. I think, the term personalised learning and personalised learning journeys is probably pretty standard for everyone nowadays. You want to sort of create that space where people feel they're being spoken directly to in terms of that learning journey that they're taking, whether it's at the topic level program, or a 2-year sort of program that they're going through. Very much at the, and I feel like I'm talking quite heavily about platforms today, but we do content as well. At the platform level, when you authenticate a learner in, whether it be your company-wide LMS or a custom learning portal that, someone's created for you, that idea that you're capturing elements about them as an individual, so their role, what team they work in, what their interests are, and then being able to match that, so in the background, having set up what the skills taxonomy is for the organisation, where are the gaps in knowledge in the company, and how can you use those two things bringing together so that they feel that their journey's being personalised towards them, but you're actually upskilling them areas where the business needs them to be upskilled in.
Good.
So, taking them through a journey where absolutely they've told you their interests, and based on course completions, they recommended 3 more. But in the background, perhaps what's working is that the organisation needs to, create more skills around this element of, team collaboration, or whether it's a specific technical skill. And what they're doing is recognising based on scores and things that, AI assesses in the background. On the admin side, they're getting fed, well, this person's actually ripe for this learning, and making those sort of suggestions. So we're really seeing, personalising the front end for the learner, but actually matching that back to the business requirements as well.
That's very
be
powerful.
well placed.
Yeah. And then, Ryan, the appetite for, we've all these challenges and preparing for tomorrow's challenges, but what do you feel the appetite is amongst your clients for AI? Certainly us rolling it out, there's a kind of a mixture of fear, excitement, anticipation. What's your experience?
Yeah, so I think a lot of our clients think everyone is using AI, and I think a lot of them aren't. And they have probably a bit of FOMO because they think, everyone else is using it, but we're not, and maybe a little bit of feeling left behind. But the reality is that I think we're all at the beginning of the journey, and some of our clients are using AI, but they don't really even maybe realize it. Small things like, for instance, automatically creating the transcript for a video that, is client content or whatever. Those things are all AI driven, but the client people don't realize. For instance, we took a photo today of the team, 3 of us took the camera, with the new Pixel phone, the other person jumped into and took the photo, and there's 4 of us in the photo. That's AI driven, but most people don't think about it in that way. So it's more, to me, it's more about the small things that actually can make a really big difference to your workflows that, as you're working through the day or the week. So I think the larger things are coming down the line, but the small things are still making a big difference.
What about in Skillnet, Michelle? What are you noticing amongst your clients? Is there an appetite for it?
Well, I guess, as we said, Gen I is AI is coming on. It's fairly new. Certainly digital skills would be just a huge focus for ourselves. We engaged with 14,000 trainees in digital skills across our 70 networks last year. And as I mentioned, we're very enterprise-led. So our entire model is based on listening to the needs of our member companies and responding in a very agile manner to that. So we are trying to listen to what the companies say they need, as well as underpinning that with a bit of research and innovation around it. So there's a broad range. Our Skillnet business networks work with their member companies to understand their skills needs, and then they go and procure and subsidise and support the training. And what's interesting in that is where they see, because of these evolving skills that are coming along, gaps in the current skills provision. And they can then work in partnership with the university to create new programs in this space. So if I think of even some examples at the higher end, our Technology Ireland ICT Skillnet worked to develop one of the first Masters in AI programs in collaboration with DCU, University of Limerick and University of Galway. And that's an example of the very higher level skills provision and very sophisticated training in this space. But I think, again, to kind of look at a very broad spectrum is some of the base skills, and to kind of echo that OECD report I mentioned earlier, there are 30% of people in Ireland that lack the basic digital skills. So, when it comes to kind of data literacy and digital fluency, these are things that we actually need to focus on as well. And kind of what Carl said earlier about them being core skills, it's really, really important focus. The last year, Skillnet Ireland partnered with the IDA, and we looked into the report on digital and data skills for non-IT roles. And I think there was a huge skills in terms of data skills like input, validation, visualization, digital problem solving, digital marketing. So the digital skills are across all agency now. So I know there's a lot of focus today on AI and Gen AI, but actually I don't think we should lose sight of some of the fundamental skills that are really core for a lot of agencies. And I think we saw from that report that kind of building these skills, really rely on the transversal skills that we talked about. So you need to kind of have a commitment to that lifelong learning and have a digital mindset. So there's a lot of shifts that need to happen to really kind of address some of the skills needs in this space as well.
That's quite salutary, really, when you think about it, because I know there's been a lot of talk of AI today, and 30%, we really have to kind of get back to basics before we race ahead into this brave new world. It's really interesting.
A bit of both,
Yeah, exactly. So, and Carl, you were saying that amongst your clients, they are aware, the image generation, the kind of the avatars as well, these specific areas. Are they kind of coming to you knowing this?
Yeah, some. There's no one size fits all. So it will depend on the organisation. Some will have internal teams who are real AI evangelists who are like really going at it. The challenge for our clients is actually scale, because on the most part, our average client would be a quite large organisation, sometimes investment banks. There's a couple of barriers there. One is just rolling out anything to 10,000 plus people is a challenge. Rolling out something that may be fundamentally different than it was 2 weeks ago is an even bigger challenge. Yeah. So it can be a little bit overwhelming, even for those really large clients. So we have experiences right across the gamut. So people who have embraced it since before I knew what AI was, right up to people who, no, not touching you, can't access ChatGPT in the office, So it's really, it's kind of getting under the hood of the client. What do they actually need? Like we have some solutions. We have off-the-shelf courses around AI ethics, AI applications, that type of thing. That would be good as a box-ticking exercise, but the information contained within may be irrelevant in 1 month's time.
Yeah.
And that's the real challenge.
Yeah.
So I think it's really on the leadership of the organisation of how deeply they want to embed it into their processes and how far they want to take it.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm certainly seeing as we roll our product out is, and this is really important in an event like this, is there's an education piece that's needed. And I think people are tired and they've been through a pandemic and, they're all being asked to do less with more. And when they're asked to use new models, there needs to be a very good reason why, as opposed to let's try it. Natalie, just looking back, you were saying, your clients, they're aware of avatars and personalization, but you were saying sometimes there can be a hesitancy there as well. Is that right?
I mean, they're always open to the conversation. So we tend to spend a lot of time sort of exploring the challenges, before we get to the solution. You see a lot of different, it varies, we have a number of different platforms and different approaches to content development, and, every client solution is different. What they're always interested in is having the initial conversation, so they might have a vision and it might include AI, but we're finding practically on the ground that when we get to the point where we're actually solutionizing and bringing it together, they're quite hesitant to actually push the button. And it's either because the governance around something like that is not set up at the organizational level, or it could be budget, or it just could be generally a little bit of a fear because they don't have the knowledge, as you're speaking about, and the confidence to drive that forward. And then again, you can upskill someone on the use of AI in their learning interventions, and then that person moves on and all of a sudden it falls to somebody else. So it's making sure that everybody in the organization is well versed, so that you're completely adaptable to those things you're creating with the use of AI. When you create a module itself, like an e-learning module that would sit on a platform, it's fine to idealize, I suppose, how you could use that to make the course more interactive and, more, it's fun to consume, but actually, is it practically adding any value? So we always tend to look at that, like, what's most impactful on the ground for you as an organisation? What does success look like? And if that incorporates AI, then we'll explore it and implement it. But actually, at a practical level, if all of it's doing is add in a layer of complexity and cost, then is it actually worth, that investment? Probably the last thing I would say on that, just from my experience, is we do a lot of public sector bids, and you'll always see it in the tender request, but it's always in the nice to have. I haven't really seen. I exclude personalised learning out of that because I think it's sort of pretty standard now in the requirements. But we've never seen a tender come out where it's critical that AI is completely embedded, in every part of the solution. Yeah. It tends to track back to the practicalities around the data and analytics and the insights and things like that. So that's just probably what we're seeing.
I think it'll be really interesting to see where we are next year. I was reading recently that we're at the same stage with AI now as we were in 1996, as we were with the internet. So it's still quite new, and certainly that's being borne out here. The difference, of course, is that, it took a lot longer for the internet. The pace of change of AI is exponential. It's moving extremely quickly. So my experience, certainly running an AI company, is, remain curious. Don't implement it because you feel pressured. But I think the worst thing you could do is actually decide, this is a fad, because it's not a fad. It is getting better all the time. But I completely agree with you, Natalie. Look at the business case. It's about solving problems. If AI will help you solve that problem, great. But, don't be rushing into something because you feel you have to, definitely, yeah. Thank you all very much. I'd like to thank you all for a very interesting panel. Thanks a million. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll take this with me.